The information contained in this video is intended for educational purposes. We are not responsible for any damage to your device resulting from improper disassembly or installation. Proceed at your own risk.
This is Mike from GoCellPhoneRepair.com, and today we're going to replace the screen on an HTC One M8. Please note that if you're looking for tools, replacement parts, or more information about this repair, you can usually find it in the video description by following the link, and also that this is an advanced level repair. So a few things have changed on the M8, the main one being that you don't have to basically destroy the back panel in order to open up the phone. You'll have two panels at the top and bottom here that cover the access screws. So you might be able to get into this with a thin pry tool. Right now we tried to use a flexible nylon pick. That didn't really work, so switched over to a razor blade. If you have something like the iSesamo, you might be able to get underneath this. Of course, be careful not to cut yourself in the process. And once you get underneath here where you're prying, then you can switch over to a softer tool and it should come off pretty easy. There's just a little bit of adhesive underneath. And you can see the phone got turned on by accident here. So we're going to go ahead and power that down and then flip it over, and we'll have this other panel on the bottom. So try not to bend these too much when you remove them, but even if you do, you can always kind of straighten them out before you put them back on, as long as you don't create any creases. And fortunately, if they get beat up, you can order replacements as well. So this phone is going to have a combination of T5 Torx screws and also Phillips. So we'll be using both of those drivers in order to remove the access screws and then the internal screws once we get the panel off. And you'll see here we're switching over to the T5 for these bottom set. Now, once you've got all the screws removed, do make sure that you remove both of these trays as well. Because that will be a problem if you try to pry the panel off without taking them out first. The next thing we're going to do is a lot of very careful prying around the edges here. Now, be patient with this. Like I said, it's not as hard as the M7, but it's still kind of a pain to get this thing open. So you have to take your time. If you've got a really badly shattered glass on the front of this, you might want to tape it up so you don't get glass in your hands. But be persistent, don't force it, and if you take your time, you will be able to get inside and pry this out from the rear housing. And you can see we're using one of the pry tools as basically to hold the frame so it doesn't go back inside as we work around the perimeter. So if you've got some extra pry tools on hand, it's not a bad idea to just tuck them in there so that it doesn't close back up on you as you're working your way around. And of course, if you want to, you can skip ahead the next 30 seconds or a minute or so until we get this thing released. But we wanted to show you the entire process from start to finish. So I've speeded the video up in a few places, but I really want everyone to have a realistic expectation of how much effort goes into taking this out. So you won't think that you're doing it wrong if it takes you a while, because it can be a little tough to open these things up. And of course, the main thing is not to scratch up the bezel or bend the housing at all during this process, which is why we like to stay away from metal tools or anything that's too heavy. All right, and you can see it finally released the last clip there. So again, just patience and persistence. Also, keep track of your power button. We probably would want to add some Scotch tape on the outside to hold that in place next time before we start taking the panel off, because it's easy to lose that if you're not careful. Now on the inside, as I mentioned, this phone is really just very similar to the M7. Lots of antenna cables, wires, flex cables. I'm not going to name each one of them here, but if you follow the video, you'll see the entire process. There's a lot of stuff to take apart, lots of things to unplug, and just makes you wonder about who designed this way and why. Apparently it's working to a certain extent, but when it comes to repair, this is probably a lot more complicated than it really needs to be. All right, so you want to carefully peel back this foil. If you find that heat is helpful, you might want to warm the surface a little bit. It'll prevent this from tearing and makes it a little bit easier to peel back. But the fact of the matter is there's just a whole lot of stuff here you have to work around. So your flex cables are going to be located underneath this shielding. Try to keep them in one piece. If you tear this particular piece here, or the one on the right-hand side, it's not going to be a deal breaker, but it's just a lot easier to work with if you keep it in one piece. So you want to get under here and just kind of take your time. It's kind of a combination of adhesive and foil of some sort. I believe it's copper. And just very sticky towards the outside. And do take your time. You don't want to accidentally grab any of those flex cables or the connectors while you're working with this. So you can see the way they're situated. It would be easy to damage this if you're not careful. What we're going to do is flip these open, and I'd recommend you use a plastic pry tool, something a little bit wider than the tweezers. Try to get a flat edge up against this so that you open the entire connector at one time. You don't want to place a lot of stress on any given point there. You kind of want to pry the whole thing at once, and you'll see they just kind of open up to the left on this side. And then when you move over to the other side of the phone, they're going to open up towards the outer edge of the phone as well. And then you'll be able to slide them out, and they may be stuck on this tape. So do be careful if you're going to peel them off that you don't tear the cable in the process. And also, they've got an antenna wire on the right-hand side that runs underneath the adhesive. Like I said, it's just really a mess on the inside. I hope you don't break this phone, but if you do, here's what you're up against when it comes to the repair. And you can see we're kind of stabilizing those flex cables when we peel the adhesive off. Very easy to tear them if you're not careful. Alright, so we've got antenna wires down here at the bottom, the battery connector, all kinds of flat flexible cables, and we need to make sure that we get everything out of the way. And you can see there's a little rubber fitting up there that comes out. So you want to get underneath that. Right up here. That's the one I was referring to. That's got to come off. And from here, we should be able to release the motherboard. You might find a little bit of adhesive holding it in place, but as long as you make sure everything's unplugged and you have no screws remaining, you can actually just kind of wiggle it and it will lift out of the housing. Again, expect a little bit of adhesive at either end. And you might even go underneath there and pry the bottom right hand corner where you see the PCB. And there we have part of the way through. Now we've still got the battery and the secondary board at the top and all the components that are going to be transferred, including the charging port. So you want to very carefully go under this with the flat tool. And it looks like that one might be a little wide for the job, so we're going to switch back over to the blade. Be very careful if you use a sharp object. You don't want to cut anything or poke any holes, and especially cut yourself. But once you get it started, you can switch back over to a plastic or nylon tool, which is going to be a little bit safer. And we can remove that from the housing. Alright, so we've got the secondary board up here at the top that's going to come out. So we'll go ahead and take out the screws. And of course, make sure that that cable is not stuck on the adhesive. And if you peel that tape off here, it's going to reveal yet another FFC connector. And one more on the left-hand side. So we're going to go ahead and open up those connections and push the cable back so it's not stuck in there anymore. And then, as you saw just a second ago, we're going to go ahead and probably leave that antenna wire connected to the board. And as you start to bring this out, you'll notice that, if I remember correctly, the camera is probably going to have to, the motor is going to be stuck down inside against the back there. So make sure you dislodge the vibration motor, and from here you should be able to remove it once you pull this power button off of the frame. There's a little bit of adhesive underneath it. So we'll pry out the speaker from here. Be very careful if you're using a sharp object. You do not want to puncture the diaphragm on the opposite side of the speaker that you can't see right now. So you don't want to go underneath this. You just kind of want to pull on it from the side or the edge, because as you'll see when it flips over here, it's very easy to damage the speaker if you're not careful. So on the inside, there's an adhesive that goes around the edges, but on the center, there's a very fragile little part of the speaker, and if you poke a hole in it, your speaker is going to be blown, and you will have to replace it. So be careful with that one. Now we're going to make sure these cables are clear so that we can get inside and remove this battery. Now they tend to use quite a bit of adhesive on these, so you may want to hit this with the heat gun. Take your time once again and just carefully get underneath here. If you poke a hole in the battery, that's a wrap. You will have to replace it. So be very careful here and do not use a sharp object, whatever you do when you're prying the battery. This one came out a little easier than expected. And you can see the tape kind of peeled off a little bit there. So we'll straighten that out. We have our replacement part here, and it's going to have adhesive installed. So all we have to do is peel off that blue wax paper that you see, and that will expose the new adhesive, so you won't have to cut your own. The part that you get should come with this already installed. If not, you can always cut some yourself. 3M 300 LSE works pretty well. If you check out my website, I've got a page of adhesives, and the red tape adhesive is one of my favorites. It's on a roll, it's very easy to cut, and it's very strong. But again, if you've got anything left over, like from an iPhone 4 adhesive or anything that's a 300 LSE, tends to work pretty well. So we will go ahead and install the battery, and the reassembly will be pretty much the reverse of the disassembly. I'm not going to narrate the entire video. The rest of this should be pretty self-explanatory, but of course, as always, if you have questions, you can post them in the comment section. Visit my website, go to the page for the M8 disassembly. There's a comment section there as well. I do try to answer those comments as often as I possibly can. And if a question has been answered more than once or several times, I will add it to the video description. So please check there before you post your question. If it's already answered, or if it can help a lot more people, I'm definitely going to include it in the description, and you might be able to get your answer right away if you check there. If you found the video helpful, hit the like button and feel free to share it on the social network platform of your choice. Check out some of my recent repair and product review videos and visit us on the web at gocellphonerepair.com. Thanks for watching.